What if I told you some Pokemon cards were so controversial they had to be completely changed, banned, or erased from history? We're talking about a card accused of racism, a card that showed a nude character, and one that has disappeared for over 20 years because of a lawsuit. And the craziest part? Most people collecting today have no idea these versions even existed. So today, we're going to go through the most controversial Pokemon cards ever printed, and trust me, some of these should not have made it past approval. Let's start with the card that sparked one of the biggest controversies in Pokemon history. The Pokemon that used to give me childhood nightmares because of how scary they looked. Jinx. Back in 1999, when Pokemon first came to the West, Jinx looked very different. In the original Japanese artwork, Jinx had jet black skin, and almost immediately people began calling it out as racist, with many comparisons to blackface imagery. I mean, come on, look, what were they thinking? Whether or not that was the original intent, it didn't matter. The backlash in North America was fast and serious, so then Pokemon responded by completely redesigning Jinx moving forward. Unfortunately, when I say redesign, their skin color was changed to purple. Game Freak had a chance to spare me as a little kid from the nightmares, but they just fixed the one major problem, and that version is the one we still see to this day. The original version now stands as a snapshot of a moment Pokemon would rather forget. Now, this next one is probably the most shocking when you see it for the first time. Misty's Tears. This card came from the Japanese gym set, but it never made it to the English in its original form for some very obvious reasons. The artwork shows Misty completely nude from the side while hugging a Staryu. Even though nothing explicit is shown, it is still a child. Like, who thought this was a good idea at all? This was a Pokemon card marketed to kids and somehow it got printed? With Jinx, sure, I can understand if there's a misunderstanding or whatever, but there's no excuse for this. When it came time for the Western release, Pokemon didn't even try to edit it. They replaced it entirely with a new version where Misty's fully clothed and the tone is completely different. That decision turned the original into one of the most infamous banned cards in the hobby, and a good decision on Pokemon. Uniquely, this next one is much more subtle, but once you see it, it is creepy. Team Rocket Grimer. At first glance, it looks like a normal Pokemon card, but if you focus on Grimer's eyes in the original Japanese version, it appears like it's looking up a girl's skirt. Once again, whether it was intentional or not, the implication was enough to raise concerns to fix the card instead of leaving it. For the Western release, it was a simple fix. They repositioned the eyes to not look under the girl's skirt. Same card, same artwork, but now far less uncomfortable. Now, Grimer is creepy, but it's not just because of that little slip up. It is because Grimer is not subscribed and didn't like the video. And if you're not subscribed, I probably would before you end up like Grimer. Anyways, here's one that's not actually bad and is pretty funny. Sabrina's Gaze. In the Japanese version, Sabrina is holding up her hand in a way that looks like she's giving the middle finger. Obviously, that's not something you want in a kid's cards game. Personally, I don't think it's even that bad. I mean, look at the card. Sabrina is not messing around. They need to show that she means business. Guess it is a good thing I don't work at Game Freak. Anyways, for the English release, they changed the image to show her throwing a Pokeball instead. Same character, completely different message, and not as funny. But this next controversy wasn't about something that was intentionally bad. It was about a clear misunderstanding. Koga's ninja trick featured a symbol known as the manji in its original Japanese artwork. In Japan, this is a Buddhist symbol representing peace and good fortune. But in the West, this symbol is known for a very bad thing that also carries a very different meaning. Clearly, this was a misunderstanding and in good faith, but to avoid confusion and backlash, Pokemon removed the symbol entirely for the international releases. One small detail made a huge difference and avoided disaster. Now, let's zoom forward more than a decade, and you'd think Pokemon had figured everything out by then. Well, not exactly. In 2012, Magmortar from Dragons Exalted became controversial for a different reason. Violence. The original artist showed Magmortar's pointing its armed cannon directly at the viewer, almost like it was targeting you. And during this time, things were tense in the West with violence and children consuming media. That was considered too aggressive. So for the English version, they changed the angle so it wasn't aimed straight forward. This marked the first time in 12 years that a card had been altered specifically for Western audiences, which was a good call. Moving on, this next one is just strange. Moo Moo Milk featured artwork in the Japanese version that showed a sentient drinking milk directly from a cow-themed otter contraption. It didn't take long to realize that this was a bit too suggestive for the Western audiences, and also it is just really weird. Like, did they think kids would look at this and go, wow, that's amazing art? When the card was localized, the artwork was toned down significantly to something much more neutral. Just a bunch of metal jugs of milk. It's definitely a design that makes you wonder how it got approved in the first place. Shifting gears, here's a much more subtle change, but still an important one and interesting. In the original artwork of Sabrina's Gengar, there are graveyard crosses in the background. While that might not seem like a big deal, Pokemon has always been careful about including religious imagery. For the English version, the crosses were removed entirely. The Pokemon and composition stayed the same, but the background was quietly altered to avoid potential issues. I just thought this was interesting because this card was changed the same time when Koga's ninja trick got changed, and those cards came out at the same time. So I'm wondering if these cards are what stopped religious imagery ending up in Pokemon cards. Believe it or not, here's something you might have not noticed as a kid. Some Pokemon cards originally included slot machines. Cards like Arcade Game and Card Flip Game clearly referred to casino-style gambling in their Japanese versions. While that wasn't a major issue in Japan, it was a different story in the West, where gambling is a sensitive topic, especially in the products aimed at kids. To address this, the artwork was redesigned to remove any obvious gambling elements. Finally, the most insane story of them all. This isn't just a controversy, this is a 20-year legal battle. Dark Kadabra became the center of a lawsuit brought by illusionist Uri Geller, who claimed the character was based on him. He pointed to the psychic theme, the spoon bending, and even Kadabra's Japanese name as evidence. Somehow it worked. Kadabra was effectively banned from the Pokémon TCG, with no new cards or reprints for over 2 decades. Think about that. An entire Pokemon just disappeared from the card game. We didn't get a Kadabra card for 20 years because of this guy. Then in 2020, Uri Geller dropped the lawsuit and even issued an apology. Just like that, Kadabra was allowed to return. When you look back at this whole crazy list, these cards weren't just simple mistakes. They show us exactly how Pokemon had to completely change things up as they expanded from Japan into a massive global powerhouse. Different cultures have totally different expectations, and sometimes that means nuking a card design or disappearing an entire Pokemon for 2 decades. But honestly, that's why these cards are some of the most interesting pieces in the entire hobby. They're not just rare, they carry the wildest stories that most other cards simply never will. If you enjoyed this wild ride through Pokemon history, you absolutely need to see my video breaking down the most expensive Pokemon card ever. That story is just insane and I definitely don't think you should miss it. But leave a comment down below and tell me, did you know about any of these cards I covered, or did you already hear about all of these? What cards did I miss and that you want to hear about? And remember, you never know what history you're holding on to this whole time.